Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the, I'm sorry, what is it, May 22nd? The May 22nd meeting of the Bellingham City Council. First, I'd like to make some announcements of upcoming meetings. On Monday, June 5th, we will actually have two hearings. The first hearing is to consider a comprehensive plan amendment relating to the Barclay neighborhood. And on that same evening, June 5th, also around 7 o'clock, we'll have another public hearing to consider a comprehensive plan amendment for the Cordata neighborhood plan. Would you all please now join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
April Barker.
Here.
Dan Hamill.
Here.
Gene Knudsen.
Here.
Michael Lilliquist.
Here.
Roxanne Murphy.
Here.
Pinky Vargas.
Here.
Terry Borneman.
Here.
Okay, first item of business tonight will be a public hearing, and then we'll follow that up with our regular 15-minute public comment period. This public hearing is to consider a resolution, which we adopt annually, regarding the draft 2018-2023 Transportation Improvement Program, which we call the TIP. The 6-year TIP is adopted annually to plan and program public funding towards capital improvements to Bellingham's multimodal transportation network. State law requires cities to adopt the TIP before July 1st of each year. The draft TIP is based on Public Works staff recommendations, and Public Works staff presented the draft earlier to the Transportation Commission on May 9th. Public Works staff will again present specific funding information regarding all projects listed in the draft TIP, followed immediately by our public hearing tonight. Afterwards, a City Council work session has been scheduled to consider adoption of the draft TIP, and that will be on June 5th when we have that work session. Should I turn it over to you, Ted, to start with?
Sure, very briefly. Ted Carlson, Public Works Director. I think the summary statement did a nice job of explaining why we're here tonight. I'll turn it over to Chris Como, Transportation Planner. He will go through the draft TIP. Staff will be available to answer any questions that the council may have, and then we'd ask council to open up the public hearing afterwards. And as was mentioned, we certainly did schedule a work session for your next council meeting to go over this in any more detail that council may want. So with that, Chris.
Thanks, Ted. Good evening, council, and happy Public Works Week. Okay. That's all right. That's how we roll. Okay, so we're going to show you our draft 6-year TIP, 2018 to 2023. This version that's displayed here is the version that's been posted on the city website in addition to the original draft that was published May 2nd. This is after the TC had looked at this. There were some clerical errors that had been made. Those have been corrected, so it's pretty much numbers that were just changed. So I'm just going to walk you through some of the basics. You can't read this. This is the state law requirement. The center one is probably the easiest one to read. A couple of things highlighted. Our 6-year TIP essentially needs to be consistent with our transportation element of our comprehensive plan, and we need to make sure that if we've got bicycle and pedestrian plans, which Bellingham does, that it's consistent with those as well. Ultimately, we want our 6-year TIP to create a coordinated program for transportation improvements, and that's melding all of our plans together for citywide improvements. These are the documents that pertain directly to the 6-year TIP, the comprehensive plan, the PED plan, the pedestrian plan, the bicycle master plan, our annual report, transportation report on annual mobility. There's a lot of information in there that goes to inform the 6-year TIP. And we also look at WTA's strategic plans, and we work hand in hand with them. In our comprehensive plan transportation element, we've got our goals that are in line with our city legacies and strategic commitments. We've also made a commitment to complete networks, trying to create defined networks for each mode of transportation, and we've created a modal hierarchy where we're always trying to design for pedestrian safety. That way our streets will be as safe as possible. What we're doing with our 6-year TIP is we're programming money to try to take advantage of opportunities, situations that exist, and That means that a certain type of project is really what we want to look at as candidates for inclusion in the 6-year TIP. There's always more need in our city than we're going to have money to address, and so we have to be incredibly careful and strategic in how we program this money. We try to be strategic and try to leverage our local funding to go get outside state and federal funding for grants. And we've been very successful with that. But what I've outlined here is just the kind of things that we look at when we go put the 6-year TIP together. We want to make sure that they're high priorities in our bicycle and pedestrian master plans. We're trying to address needs, predominantly safety as well as other things. We think that they're good grant funding candidates, and when we say that, we have to know what the grant funding agency is looking for in terms of their criteria, how competitive we can be with other cities going after the same funding pot, things like that. And then the timing of these grant funding cycles, they're all different, and not all of them are every year. A lot of them, in fact, are every 2 years, so we have to be very careful about how we go after this money. We also try to create partnerships with other agencies, whether it's the universities, the county, or WTA, and we've done a lot of that. We've been very successful with that. And of course, we have to look at where all the growth is happening in our town, and ideally, try to weave all of this together and come up with a list of projects that we believe has a good chance to get money. This is the list of our various funding sources. I'm not going to go through this, but it's pretty extensive, and we try to be as aggressive as we can with going after a lot of this money. What I wanted to show you is how successful we've been over the last 7-8 years since the Transportation Benefit District was approved by the voters in 2010. We've been able to make a lot of progress in terms of building out the pedestrian and bicycle networks. In blue, you can see all the bicycle projects that we've been able to do, and in orange are the pedestrian projects. This includes both local street fund, Transportation Benefit District funds, and grant funding. And then in this next slide, you can see the difference between our grant funding and our Transportation Benefit District funding. So again, we're trying to leverage our local money, going out for money for these very big projects that are multi-million-dollar projects, and these are the places where we've been able to make those investments. So now we get into the things that we're going to do this year. These are not in the 2018 to 2023 6-year TIP. These have been in the 6-year TIP. We're now going to go build them because we've been able to find the money. So this is the construction schedule, and I've tried to make some notes here just to help people understand where we're at with certain things. We always start off with our resurfacing. Holly will be wrapping up here in early June. We're going to begin in June the James Woodstock intersection reconstruction and realignment. West Maplewood, basically a safe route to school project along West Maplewood in the Birchwood neighborhood is going to begin in June. 12th Street sidewalk improvements in Fairhaven are also going to begin in June, beginning of July actually. Mahogany is going to be late summer, early fall. And then down in the waterfront, Granary Laurel, probably autumn of this year. And below that, we've got a whole list of bicycle and pedestrian specific projects that have been programmed, and we're going to be out there doing these at various points in the summer, along with some of the other capital projects. But it's a lengthy list, and we just want everybody to know what's coming. Here's the geographic distribution of those projects. You can see we're doing quite a lot throughout the city. Now we get into our 6-year TIP, the 2018 to 2023 time period. Again, we start with our resurfacing, and there's nothing programmed. That will come sometime probably at the beginning of next year after we look at our pavement ratings and figure out where the opportunities are to do a lot of other things. But this money is programmed annually. And as you can see here in the resurfacing, as well as the next one, the non-motorized transportation improvements, which are specifically Transportation Benefit District funded, resurfacing has Transportation Benefit District funds as well as street funds. But after the year 2020, the purple shade goes away because the Transportation Benefit District ends in the year 2020. We don't know if that's going to be renewed. It's been a very valuable funding resource for us, but that's the way it looks right now. Getting down into our specific projects, we've now received the private mitigation funding for the Cordata Stewart roundabout. So we'll be designing that over the next year and building a new roundabout at the intersection of Cordata Stewart. That's right on the north side of Whatcom Community College. We've also got our Cordata Safe Route to School project, which is adding sidewalk and bike lane to the east side of Aldrich Road leading to Cordata Elementary School. We've got a new project actually on the tip, and I'll go into further detail as we go, but this is Lakeway Drive and Lincoln Street improvements. I'm going to wait till we get to the map to describe that one, but that's a grant that we got from DOT for pedestrian and bicycle safety improvements, again, leveraging our TBD funding. Orchard Drive extension, we'll begin doing the engineering and design for that, or actually some construction beginning next year. I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail as we get there. West Horton Road is a little bit further out. The year 2019 is what we're looking at, and we've got some mitigation money in that and a bunch of grant money as well. And then we get into start the unfunded projects down here, beginning with project number 8, Telegraph Road, and I'll talk a lot about that as we get there. But what happens with the columns here, all of our funding, our funded projects are in the first 3 years. After that, if it's not a funded project, it goes into the final 3 years. So the first page you see here, with these blue shades here, we start to get into the unknown funding. We don't know yet where the money's going to come from. We're trying to go after grant money for several of these projects. And we'll talk about them as we go. This is the geographic distribution of where these projects are at throughout the city. Here's our resurfacing. Again, we'll wait till the beginning of next year to find out exactly where that money's going to be spent. For the non-motorized projects, typically projects like this, whether it's a sidewalk or bike lane project, a lot of the bike lane projects get done with resurfacing. Usually, we need about a year to understand where the opportunities are and then go design and do the engineering to get to the construction point. So these all say design 2017, build 2018. And it also depends on whether we can go out and get some grant money. And again, we'll be looking at that all the way through. But this is the list of things that are anticipated in 2018. And then also 2019, and these are they're further out, but they're things that we want to keep an eye on in case an opportunity arises. And then this is a more detailed description for each one of those projects on the next page. Project number 3, Cordata Stewart. As I mentioned, we've now received this private mitigation money. It's a fully funded project, and we'll be going for construction in 2018. Here's the location. The community college is essentially right here. Cordata Safe Routes to School, again, out in the western part of the Cordata neighborhood. Here's our new project, Lakeway and Lincoln Pedestrian and Bicycle Safety and Mobility Improvements. This was an opportunity that came up to write a pedestrian and bicycle safety grant, and we used our Transportation Benefit District funds as our local match. But the pedestrian master plan identified a new crossing location at Lakeway in Toledo. And we have some existing amber flashing crosswalks at Lakeway and Grant, Lakeway and Orleans, and at Lincoln and at the Fred Meyer driveway. We're going to be upgrading all of those existing flashing crosswalks to Hawk signals. And then the new location at Lakeway and Toledo will also get a Hawk signal crossing. And then in addition to that, there's sections of sidewalk that will be built on the west side of Orleans Street where the ball fields are there. There's no sidewalk. They'll go from Lakeway down to Potter. And then on Nevada Street, all along the east side, we'll be filling in the gap between where the sidewalk ends and up to Thimbleberry in the Puget neighborhood. And then there will be a continuous sidewalk all the way up into that neighborhood. At the same time, Nevada will be turned into what we call a bicycle boulevard. That'll involve some traffic calming features to keep traffic speeds relatively low. And then moving over to the Grant Street Bike Boulevard in our bike master plan. This will take us from the meter bike lanes all the way through the York neighborhood, crossing at the new Hawk signal at Lakeway and Grant, down through South York and into the Samish Urban Village and the Seahome neighborhood over here, down to Bill McDonald Parkway and the bike lanes over here. We'll talk more about that in just a little bit. The intersection of Otis and Maple, got a little note here, and there's another project in the 6-year tip, so keep the intersection of Otis and Maple in mind. Orchard Drive extension. We've had this in the 6-year tip for a long time. This has been in our comprehensive plan for over 10 years. And as everybody should know, we've rerouted Squalicum Creek. We've built the Beta Baker Trail. We're going to get into the James Woodstock intersection improvements. The section of James Street now has been built to urban standards. And now Orchard is kind of the last piece in this kind of suite of things that we're doing here. As you can see in this slide, there's a lot of development that's been approved right here, over 500 homes. And so this will help support north central Bellingham, the whole King Mountain neighborhood, in fact, with a grade-separated crossing of Interstate 5 going underneath the freeway, and also over time serving all of this development. What's interesting about it is that we got $10 million in state gas tax revenue, but it's split between 2 bienniums. And so we're going to get $3.5 million in the first biennium, which is great, but we can't build the whole project with just $3.5 million. So we're going to do as much as we can. And hopefully, there's other people out there who have not made as much progress as Bellingham has, and Bellingham will be able to get their allocation, keep building, and we'll just have them get our money when the time comes. So we believe we're going to be able to make a lot of progress there, but unfortunately not all the money is in one batch, and we'll make as much progress as we can. And that'll start in 2018. West Horton Road, again, as we mentioned, it's essentially fully funded, and we're moving toward construction late 2018, probably 2019. Very expensive, very complicated project going through this area, connecting the dead end in Cordata with Aldrich Road, just north of where the Cordata Elementary School is here. It'll be a great new connection, regional connection, and get people over to Aldrich, connect up the transportation system in that part of the city. This project, Telegraph Road, we added to the 6-year TIP last year after we learned that WTA had made a decision as a result of its strategic plan update to reroute the Gold Go line, their high-frequency transit route, and they took it off of Sunset and I-5 going up to Bellis Fair Mall, and they've rerouted it now through Sunset Square onto James Street, then onto Telegraph and Deemer and to the Winco, and then over to the mall. So it creates a situation for us. There's a tremendous amount of development happening on Telegraph Road, and now there's high-frequency transit service, which is great, but there are no sidewalks or bicycle facilities on Telegraph, and so we need to make sure we try to get that in place. And unfortunately, it's a very, very expensive proposition. And we are going for grants right now. We've already submitted one grant. That's why you see the word pending here in the federal column. And we're going to be submitting another grant later this summer for state funding. We're very hopeful that we'll be successful there, but it's going to take a couple of years to get this built. In the meantime, there's literally hundreds of apartments being built along Telegraph and in the permitting stages. Northwest and West Bakerview, we've conducted a safety study here over the last year, and we've learned a lot. There was a high collision history here. There's been a lot of development happening up in this part of town. We are not yet done with the study, but we've got some things to consider, and we'll keep you informed as those continue to develop. But this project has been in the 6-year TIP for quite a while, and we'll continue to work toward a solution and then figure out where we're going to find the money to make some of these improvements. Our James Bakerview roundabout has been mostly designed, but we do not have the funding to actually construct it. You can see there's a bit of a funding gap there with over $3 million needed to build this. Over time, as the King Mountain area continues to develop, this will become more and more of a priority, and we'll continue to look at this for funding opportunities. This is a new project on the 6-year TIP this year. It's a bridge reconstruction. This bridge has a poor rating in terms of its structural rating, and so we need to go address it. And there's a grant that's been applied for, and we'll find out later this fall whether we're successful. That's why, again, you see the word pending in here with the federal BRAC funding. Here's our Quiet Zone project, and this is essentially just showing that we've been programming $250,000 a year toward this type of improvement. And right now, this is the location that we're kind of focused on in terms of making the improvements. This is down at Boulevard Park, the vehicle crossing of the railroad tracks leading into Boulevard Park. This is a new project on the 6-year TIP. This is the Samish Maple Ellis Corridor. And remember what I was mentioning about the Otis Maple intersection. We have just about concluded the Samish Corridor study. I'll be at the Seahome neighborhood meeting tomorrow night, showing them a presentation of what we've discovered and what we think we can do. And so we've gone ahead and put this in the 6-year TIP in anticipation of seeking some grants next spring. There will be one call for projects. We think we can be very successful with this. So it's in the 6-year TIP. Most grant funding agencies require it to be in the 6-year TIP before you can even apply. Actually, I just want to say one thing. Otis Maple, this intersection right here, we're looking at kind of a short-term situation. We may be able to do something here in conjunction with the Lakeway Lincoln improvements that I described to you by picking up and taking the Lakeway grant flashing crosswalk and moving it over here to the Samish Corridor. So we're hopeful. We'll continue to work on that, and hopefully we can make a minor improvement there in the short term. James Street has been on our 6-year TIP for a while. Again, in the King Mountain neighborhood, this is becoming an increasingly important link. Unfortunately, it's very complicated. It's very narrow, rural roadway, no sidewalks, deep ditches on the sides. It also crosses some ravines, which have some environmental constraints, which is going to make it very challenging for us to find the money to do this. But we're going to keep it here as a priority, and any opportunities that come up, we'll be looking at. North James Street is actually being built privately by a developer building subdivisions up on the King Mountain hillside here. And he's building the section of the Archero Street as he goes. And so this is in here, and because the developer's been able to get to this before the city can, he receives transportation impact fee credits, which is a great deal for the city because it would cost us a lot more money to build this than the developer's able to. And then finally, our last project in the draft 6-year TIP is our West Horton Road Extension Phase 2. This is a partnership with Whatcom County. They received some grant money. We're taking that and working on the design along with our other West Horton Phase 1 project. This is a much longer term project. This is very expensive, going from Aldrich Road all the way over to Northwest. Fantastic regional connection, but very expensive, so it'll take quite a long time. Probably need to wait for a while for growth to catch up as well, but we'll continue to work on the design and then hand it back over to the county. Someday, this area up here may become part of the city. We don't know, but we're just looking out on the horizon, and this is another regional connection. And that's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Excuse me, thank you, Chris. Council members, any questions before we open the hearing?
Just one quick one.
Gene?
Is this list getting smaller over the years, or because usually it seemed like we had 22, 23 projects, or are we just doing it different, or?
We have tried to narrow it down a little bit. It just kind of depends year to year on what projects we think meet some of the criteria that Chris talked about at the beginning and might be good candidates for grants. But it is definitely have fewer projects this year than it has in the past.
Okay. I'd like to mention one thing with that. I'm just going to throw this back up there. This, whoops. Sorry. There are fewer projects this year than there have been in past years. And one thing I'd like to make sure people take note of is some of the projects on the back end of the 6-year TIP in the out years are very, very expensive projects. And it's going to take us a lot of effort to find the money to do those.
Okay.
Terry?
Yeah, on the Telegraph Road project, you mentioned two things with that. One, about all the new growth that's have been built there and being built there, and that there's no sidewalks. Isn't the new growth that's going in the apartments required to put in sidewalks?
Yes, they are, and every development that has happened has actually had to make the street frontage improvements. But we're talking about 2/3 of a mile, and it's been done very sporadically. And so we need to have a cohesive.
So it's filling in. When you said no sidewalks,
it is, and a lot of it has been on the western end near the Deemer intersection. There's starting to be some other things happening, like Colshan Community Land Trust and Habitat for Humanity are going to build some townhomes kind of on the east end. But there's a lot of properties that probably aren't going to redevelop anytime soon, and so we're essentially responsible if we want to have continuous sidewalks and bike lanes there. The other thing that's happening with that is we're trying to put in a center turning lane, and that's, you know, the developer that does the frontage improvements does have to develop to that standard, and there's some examples of that out there, but we have to do the entire corridor.
Okay. So when the others develop out, then we collect from them for the
They are
sidewalks.
responsible for funding and constructing their street frontage improvements. And in fact, in the slide, you can see the private contributions. That's where that private mitigation money comes from. It's either transportation impact fees that have been paid or street frontage improvement, the cost of those improvements.
Okay, thanks.
Roxanne?
A question, should we be at all worried about federal funding since we have a presidential administration that will hopefully care about our highways and bridges but might not be as excited about bicycles as we are here?
I'm not aware that we have anything to worry about in terms of the federal funding. What we've applied for with the federal funding is a known funding pot. I don't know if there are other things at the federal level that might affect some of that money. I've been told that there's not, because the transportation piece is not connected to some other pieces. But I think we're fairly confident that we're going to secure the federal money this time around.
Ted?
The majority of the federal funding that the city receives is filtered through the COG, the Council of Governments, and the organizations in the Council of Governments play a big part in identifying the criteria that we use to rank the project. So that may not be the case for other federal funding, but hopefully as long as that highway money comes through the DOT and through the COG, the city's policies will have a big part in developing the criteria and how we select those projects.
Dan?
So TBD is up in 2019 or 2020?
It's up. It needs to go on a ballot in 2020 if it's to be renewed. It would end at the end of 2020.
And so right now we're currently resurfacing and bike ped improvements with that?
Yeah, with the most recent change that came to the city council, I believe last year, perhaps the year before, we moved from the one-third to the half going to non-motorized, half going to resurfacing. We still coordinate with WTA, and we certainly prioritize non-motorized projects that directly serve transit. But yeah, at this point, we bring in around $5 million a year, so about $2.5 million going to resurfacing, $2.5 million going to non-motorized.
And just to please note that every single project in the 6-year TIP actually does serve an active transit route.
Okay, thanks.
So I have one final question. I think we'll go on to the hearing after that. The Transportation Commission added a note. They observed that no identified TIP funding beyond 2020 other than the street funds. What was the significance of that comment? Have we had some secured funding further out in the past?
I think it's twofold. One is to just, again, highlight the fact that the TBD expires. And the second point is that previously, during a different time from a budget perspective, some real estate excise tax would go to transportation funding. The Transportation Commission has been looking at local funding sources, and each year in their presentation to council, they've been kind of identifying how much local money is going to transportation. Certainly, conditions changed with the TBD, and the city was able to look at other priorities for the REIT funding. But I think that's their point. They've been pretty clear about wanting to advocate for additional local money for transportation, but probably primarily, again, highlighting the dependence on the TBD over the last 10 years, or since its inception.
Excuse me. Any further questions?
This right here.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and open the public hearing right now. Is there more questions? There's only one person signed up at the moment, Mr. Patrick McKee. If you'd like to come forward and give your comment, and then we'll see if anybody else wants to as well.
Good evening, members of the council. My name is Patrick McKee. I live on Grant Street in the beautiful Sunnyland neighborhood. As you are considering each of these projects, you have to carefully consider a number of things, and one, of course, is the cost of each of these projects. Another thing is whether we actually need these projects, and a third thing is, are they well designed? I have noticed some recent public works projects that were not well designed, and I point to the intersection of Kentucky Street and Cornwall Avenue. The Public Works Department recently installed new bump outs and rain gardens to narrow that intersection there, and I'm sure this was a fairly costly project, And now, as a result of that, and you know that's the corner where Bellingham High School is located, now school buses traveling north on Cornwall Avenue cannot make a right turn onto Kentucky Street if there is a car on Kentucky Street trying to pull out onto Cornwall Avenue. The reason is the bus has to pull into the oncoming traffic lane. So the bus has to sit on Cornwall Avenue and wait for the cars on Kentucky Street to pull out of Kentucky Street. That, in my opinion, was not a well-designed project. Projects that I've seen, and I question, do we need them? In downtown Bellingham, intersections crosswalk intersections are being narrowed with bump outs. And I'm sure these projects cost tens of thousands of dollars because they have to move traffic lights, they have to stop traffic and pour concrete. Do we really need to narrow a crosswalk by 8 feet? Is that really necessary? I think these are the kind of questions you have to ask when you're about to expend or authorize money for these projects. The Public Works Department is a voracious consumer of city revenue. They consume property taxes, sales taxes, utility taxes, real estate excise taxes, perhaps even gas taxes, I'm not sure. Have you ever noticed, oh, mercy.
30 seconds.
Well, I just want to say that I think it's time to throttle back the Public Works Department, to take some of these funds and put them into the general fund where they can be used for vitally necessary projects such as affordable housing in city-designated urban villages. You need to stop and think about doing something like that, and I hope you will consider it. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward and speak to the Transportation Improvement Program? Seeing none, I'll bring the hearing to a close. We have a work session scheduled. Is there any further questions or? Okay. I do actually have one request. Chris, I love that map you showed of what we've accomplished so far on the bike and ped plans. I actually had a note in here. We're halfway through, or approximately the TBD. I remember when it first came out, I looked through the list and I thought, man, we're going to get pretty far through there. In addition to your map, can we also kind of get a table which shows our originally chosen lists and where we've hit the tier 1 and 2 and 3? Kind of a halfway check-in on the TBD more than a tip kind of question.
So you want to see the table format of what was shown on the map?
Yeah, but
that's actually in the transportation report on annual mobility.
Okay.
If you look in the both the Transportation Benefit District chapter, which I believe is chapter 4, I could be wrong about that, as well as the pedestrian chapter and the bike chapter, it's all broken down that way.
Okay.
It doesn't list how much money was spent on each project, but it lists them in terms of whether it was grant funded, TBD funded, and how much progress we've made. So individual projects are listed. That was the origin of those maps.
Okay, well, I'll go look at that. I'm trying to get an impression of how much progress we've made now that we're halfway through the TBD on funding those bike and ped programs. It seems like we've made a lot of progress, and I kind of wanted to see that.
We've made tremendous progress.
Okay.
Michael, we'll send you a link to that report, to that page.
Appreciate it. Anything else for the work session? Yes,
So,
April.
Because we're going to have a work session.
Yeah.
This is not, okay, just make sure. Thank you for all the work you've done, and I think just I followed the tip for a while now, and this is probably the least amount of public comment I think we've had in years, so thank you. I think you've really hit the nail on the head, but having been traveling down Telegraph quite a bit, and you've already acknowledged it, but we're going to need to talk about it in the work session. The last time I was driving down, there was kids skateboarding in the center lane because they had absolutely no way. They're landlocked. They can't. So whether it be trail connection in the backside or like figuring out how we're going to do this sooner, and I don't understand all the different ways that we can collect funds or set certain types of areas where people are paying sooner. We had some conversations about it, but I just, as a mom, as I'm watching the growth in this area, I mean, even West Maplewood, when we had to wait for that, it was still a relatively safe-ish corridor. Kids could get off and get onto grass if a car came close, but I walked that, and you literally have to stop at a guardrail and hope that, check for a bus, and then if you get onto that guardrail and you keep walking, a bus actually has to stop until you can get all the way past the guardrail, because the only next option you have is the ditch. And I know you understand all this, but I just, in conscience, knowing that we're going to be waiting till 2021, 22, and the developments going in, I would just love to talk about other ways besides this, some unique opportunities to try to fund it beyond just grants. So thank you for acknowledging the lack of safety there, especially with the new bus route, but I'll be excited to talk about that with you.
Okay, we can talk about it June 5th. I can bring many more materials about Telegraph.
Okay, anything else before we go on? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. We will now go on to the regular 15-minute public comment period. Terry? This is a time period when people who sign up are given up to 3 minutes to address the City Council as a whole on a topic of interest. We do have a timer going. When you first hear the bell, that actually means you still have 30 seconds to go ahead and wrap it up. And I see Ms. Carrie Kowaleski is signed up to speak, followed by Cora Cole.
Hi, I'm Carrie. Traditionally, mortgage lenders state you should not spend more than 28% of your gross income on housing expenses. The median household income in Bellingham in 2014 was $42,440. Based on this, the household expenses should only be $990 a month, which equates out to buying a house around $150,000. Is it even possible to buy a house right now in Bellingham for that cost? There was a house across from Broadway Park just recently sold, and it was priced at $375. And an offer came in at $425, and we found out, we know the people, that they accepted an offer higher than the $425,000, and they waived no contingencies. They waived it. So if an appraisal came for less than their offer, they're required to pay cash from the difference between what it was appraised at and what their offer was, which was somewhere over $425,000. There was another house that listed recently, or that's on the market right now, for $320,000, and it's 804 square feet. So we're looking at $398 a square foot. There is going to be multiple bids on this house. It's going to become a bidding war. Tons of people going in and out of the house. And it's more than likely going to close for about $350,000, which we're now approaching California housing prices per square foot, what the cost is. And again, this house was built in the 30s. It needs a lot of work, no closet space, and you can build a brand new house right now for $150 a square foot. And there was an interesting article on KGMI that stated that Bellingham is one of the top 3 markets in the country in which foreign buyers are searching to buy property. Bellingham is now right up there with Los Angeles and Miami. Canada topped the list, followed by Japan, Bahrain, UK, and Australia. Going back to 2016, 80% of Canadians and 61% of UK buyers were non-resident buyers, which means they buy property and they don't move in. I'm conservative, but I actually have a liberal point of view on this. I guess living in Bellingham has kind of worn off on me. I believe we need to somehow punish foreign investors who buy Bellingham property. This could be accomplished by making them pay higher property taxes for not living here, or having them pay a certain sort of fee to the city when they do buy. There needs to be some sort of a financial impact placed on them to make them think twice about parking their money here. These foreign buyers, also with elites who have a lot of money coming from out of state, is making it unaffordable for Bellinghamers. They make more money where they live, and they are investing their money here, where our median income is only $42,000. Vancouver has implemented regulations to prevent shadow inventory. This is people buying property and not living here, more than likely pushing investors to buy down here in Bellingham. And I didn't have time to finish, so I'll come back next time and finish. I have some other solutions besides implementing policies like Vancouver has.
Okay, Carrie, thank you. Cora, would you come forward now, please?
Hi, pleasure to see you all this evening. Hi, I'm Cora Cole. I'm a student at Western Washington University. I'm a political science major. It's really good to see you this evening. This evening is the 10th Monday that the Keep Bellingham Families Working Group has done their dignity vigils. I'm sure you've seen them around town, folks holding signs talking about the threats that they face from ICE. They've been doing these since shortly after the council's ordinance regarding undocumented folks passed. I want to thank the City Council for the work that they've put into this, as well as the community members who have been a part of that. There are a couple things, as these groups have pointed out, that could probably be improved about this ordinance in order to make sure that it stands up to the standard to which Bellingham holds itself as a safe and comfortable community. One would be a civilian oversight board, as was outlined by the initial task force that you all were working with when drafting this. This is something that's been implemented in other cities. I know specifically Seattle, but there's also others. Another thing that they call for is preventing city taxes from being used for immigration enforcement, as is currently allowed in Section 2.25.3030 of the ordinance. And the third thing being that it currently allows Bellingham Police Department and city employees to continue cooperating with ICE/Border Patrol for identification confirmation in Section 2.25.060. This is particularly troublesome because that's the way that a lot of racial profiling can be used to target any people of color, but is particularly damaging for undocumented people who then face a variety of threats from immigration enforcement. If you want to see a more detailed explanation of what these ordinances look like and some of the solutions that Keep Bellingham Families Working proposes, they have a website, keepbellinghamfamiliesworking.wordpress, which has contact information for the activists who spend their lives fighting the threat of deportation and supporting the communities that face that as well. Community members, you can, since you're all active in the community, if you want to get involved, you can do that by volunteering with this group, calling your city council members to talk to them about this issue, or just showing up to learn more about the threats that our undocumented neighbors face. We can and must do better by our undocumented community members, and I look forward to helping to work with you all to make this happen. Thanks, and you can all look forward to more emails about this from me later this week. Have a lovely evening and enjoy the rest of your meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else who'd like to come forward? I think we have a few minutes left in our 15-minute public comment period. Okay, seeing none, we'll just go on with our regular meeting, which would be committee reports. This morning, the Planning Committee met at 10:30, chaired by Councilmember Gene Knutson.
Thank you, Michael. We had the first in a series of Council Planning Committee work sessions on renter barriers and concerns. The significant number of Bellingham community members reside in rental housing. Recently, a number of concerns associated with renters and rental properties have been brought to Council's attention through testimony given during Council's public comment period. These concerns include how best to provide information on tenant rights and responsibilities of those who rent, as well as the source of income discrimination. In response, the Council has approved several work sessions with the Planning Community Development Committee to learn more about rental barriers and concerns, landlord management perspectives, and other relevant information. For the first in the series of work sessions, the committee has invited community members whose work relates to the initial concerns presented to discuss these issues to share their unique perspectives. There was 10 minutes at the end of the meeting to take public comment. This morning we were joined by Galen Hurst from Western Washington University, Greg Winter from the Opportunity Council, John Harmon from the Housing Authority, along with Peter Raffato, Brian Heinrich, and Kurt Nebelfeld. We discussed source of income discrimination, tenant rights, voucher discrimination, move-in fees, and a few other things were talked about this morning. Our next meeting will be inviting landlords and rental companies to come and listen to them. And as this series goes on, we will discuss between the committee members where we go from here. It was a great discussion. It was a good committee setting. April had the idea of putting everybody on the floor. It went very well, and Marie facilitated that. So it was a good first work session, and we hope we have another great turnout next time.
We were sitting at tables.
We weren't.
No, I'm just saying
All on the same level.
All on the same level.
There you go.
Well, maybe not all on the same level, but anyway, it was a good work session. So, end of committee.
Okay, any further comments on that? Great, we'll go on to the next one. Public Works and Public Safety met this afternoon, and that's chaired by Councilman Terry Borneman.
Thank you, Michael. We had one item before the committee today. It was a resolution for emergency repair at Post Point. On Saturday, May 6, 2017, a 30-inch diameter pipe connecting the secondary clarifiers to the aeration basin failed at Post Point. The pipeline is critical to the health of the activated sludge biological process used in the secondary treatment process. The pipe failure resulted in significant flooding of the underground galleries and damages to the facility and equipment. Staff are currently working to create a temporary above-ground bypass pipe, preserve and restore the secondary treatment process, and begin permanent repair. The permanent repair needs to be in place before the fall rainy season. Emergency declaration is necessary for the immediate repairs and permanent fix. The committee recommended that we pass the resolution allowing for the emergency repair, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion before us. It is to adopt a resolution authorizing emergency repairs for the pipe break at Post Point. Any further discussion?
And that was end of committee.
Oh, wasn't that a resolution? We didn't pass it yet.
I'm sorry.
We had a vote.
Yeah.
Would y'all like to vote on this one now?
Yeah.
All those in favor of passing the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? End of committee. Okay, thanks so
Now
much.
end of committee.
Okay, great.
I'm looking for the sunshine out there.
He's already checked out. Next one is the Lake Whatcom Reservoir and Natural Resources Committee, and Dan Hamill's the chair of that committee.
We had one item before us this afternoon. This is an update from the Lake Whatcom Policy Group meeting on May 15th. Just want to cover a few of the items that we discussed here. We talked about the Lake Whatcom Build-Out Report on recent residential construction trends. And this report's produced every year to provide a broad overview of construction trends in the Lake Whatcom watershed. As of January 2017, there were 7,001 existing residential units in the watershed and a potential for another 1,631 units to be developed. Most developable parcels are in Sudden Valley in the rural watershed. There are 110 potential units in the city portion. We also discussed the land acquisition and management, property management program. The city has hired a new property specialist to assist in managing the lands acquired using the acquisition fund. Staff are focusing on restoration work, and the city is removing what are known as social trails. These are mountain biking, hiking, horseback riding trails that are not built to appropriate standards, and oftentimes they're not authorized, and that could trigger erosion and other property damage. We did have a landslide on city-owned parcel near Lake Whatcom Boulevard that the city is in the process of cleaning up and stabilizing. We also discussed the total maximum daily load of the lake, enforcement and detailed implementation plan. Lake Whatcom program is working on this plan to send it to the Department of Ecology, which is due in October. This will lay out 10 years of planned activities to reduce phosphorus and coliform, with the first half of the plan containing more detail coinciding with the program's 5-year plan. Also discussed was the Aquatic Invasive Species Program. Inspection started in February, and inspection stations at Lake Whatcom and Lake Samish opened on April 22nd. Activities down somewhat year-to-date in comparison to last year, as the weather's been less conducive to boating. Thus far in 2017, there have been 1,488 permits issued, 1,923 inspections completed. We also talked with the data team folks. This is a multi-jurisdictional team consisting of staff from the city, county, water district, Department of Ecology, and Western Washington University Institute for Watershed Studies and Geology Department. This team meets 11 times a year to share information and discuss new data coming from various Lake Whatcom monitoring activities, with a focus on optimizing modeling efforts to reduce uncertainty by targeting areas where there are data gaps. We also discussed topics for the next couple of meetings. We typically in the past have met a dozen times a year, well, probably 11 times per year, but we've reduced that to 4. So these meetings become increasingly important because we have limited time to discuss these critical issues that affect our drinking water supply. So in July, we'll be talking about capital projects review, and the October meeting will include an update on city and county efforts to regulate vacation rentals in the watershed. And the Lake Whatcom Policy Group meets July 17th, 2017 at 3 p.m. in the Fireplace Room, 625 Halleck Street. That's the municipal court building. End of committee report.
Thank you, Dan. We'll now go on to the final committee, which is the Committee of the Whole. Had 4 items before us. The first was an update on the interim low-barrier homeless shelter and a day center operated by the Lighthouse Mission Ministries. Staff this afternoon provided an update on the interim low-barrier shelter currently operated by the Lighthouse Mission Ministries at the drop-in center location on 1013 West Hawley. This interim shelter has been in operation since October of 2016. Prior to that, it was a cold weather shelter only. Now it's open all the time because of the need. Staff in the Lighthouse Mission Ministry have determined that greater resources are needed in order to proactively establish, nurture, and maintain good relationships with the neighbors in the area and work with the Lighthouse Mission Ministry guests to demonstrate a good neighbor behavior. This afternoon, staff was seeking a direction from the council about whether or not to arrange for funding to enter into a contract to assist the Lighthouse Mission Ministries in creating a more extensive Good Neighbor program. Right now, they go around and kind of pick up trash and stuff in the area. This would be a far more thorough kind of self-policing effort in the neighborhood and for several blocks around to reduce any impacts that might be spread by the existence of this shelter. If council provided directions to proceed, the budget amendment will be developed in the amount of $42,000 to pay for this additional staffing services from July of this year through December of 2018. This afternoon, the council did indeed give direction to prepare a budget ordinance and come forward for discussion and possible vote at a future date. Is there anything else one wants to add? Okay. So that's what happened in that one. The next one was related. It was a resolution exempting the Lighthouse Mission's emergency interim shelter from certain state building code requirements in order to provide housing for indigent persons consistent with provisions of state law RCW 19.27.042. As I just was saying, the Lighthouse Mission is operating an interim low-barrier shelter at their existing drop-in location, building located at 1013 West Hawley. The use of this facility for shelter is permitted by the zoning consistent with state law. Building code requirements may be waived under special circumstances provided that A, the building provides housing to indigent persons, B, it's a pre-existing building, C, it's owned by a public or a nonprofit corporation. Finally, that it's actually found to be safe despite the fact of not meeting these code requirements. The building official and the fire marshal have determined that the public building code deficiencies to be exempted pose no threat to human health, life, or safety. In addition, all other criteria established under state law have been met. The adopted proposed resolution before us will allow continued operation of the interim shelter without strict compliance with the code. This afternoon we talked about it. The main issue for non-compliance is the lack of sprinklers, which would be very expensive to retrofit. Excuse me, getting over a cold. The fire marshal has talked with the Lighthouse Missions, and they're going to be instituting, I think, kind of live person monitoring to supplement any kind of fire alarm system. And the fire marshal determined that those provisions, those extra steps they're taking, would be sufficient to secure safety. If indeed we pass this resolution, the exemption can only last for 5 years, at which point it would expire. And I believe we're hoping that there'll be a more permanent solution before then. This afternoon, the Committee of the Whole recommended approval of the resolution, and I so move.
Second.
Is there any further discussion on that?
The McGuire sisters, that sounded real good.
I don't know who okay. Pinky seconded the motion. Any further discussion on this? Okay, all those in favor of the resolution exempting the lighthouse from certain provisions of the building code signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. The next item was the adoption of the 2017 National Electric Code. Under state law, the revised Code of Washington 19.28.141 requires cities which choose to enforce the electric codes to have greater or equal standards than the state electric code. And Washington State has adopted the 2017 National Electric Code, effective July 1st, 2017, as the state electric code. So to remain in compliance with state law, the City of Bellingham must now also adopt the 2017 National Electric Code, also to be effective by July 1st of 2017. This afternoon, the committee recommended passing the ordinance, and I so move.
Second.
Roxanne seconded. Any discussion of this one? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously as well. The last item, actually, we had significant discussion. It was a work session on a proposed jail financing and facility use agreement. Staff was seeking direction this afternoon on a proposed jail financing and facility use agreement, the JFFUA, as we affectionately are now calling it. The JFFUA describes the financial agreements, including the use of the sales tax and cost allocations for each participating jurisdiction in the county with regard to that sales tax and how it would be used for the jail and jail-related expenses. The JFFUA also describes the uses of the proposed facility as well as certain operational aspects of the existing facility. There was actually substantial discussion on this. One of the things that I think our discussion focused on is what the facility use agreement does and what it doesn't do. I think there was some positive comments on a lot of the aspects of this improved agreement. There's a lot of work done by council members here and other committee members across the county to come up with this revised version. We didn't take any action on it. I think our direction to staff was that we want to see indeed what the county council is deciding to do on a range of issues, which we were discussing, having to do with other aspects of jail planning over which this council here in the city has no control, the final size, the final location, other concerns that are over there across the street with the county council. Is there any more discussion or comments on that? So that'll be coming forward at a future date when we learn more about where the county is headed in their jail planning and whether or not they will be going forward with anything to the voters this year. So I think we are now on to minutes for approval. We have one set of evening minutes.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, these are meeting minutes for, is that them? For May 8th. Okay. Any corrections or discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes for May 8th signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that also passes unanimously. Moving on, items for old and new. We had several items discussed this afternoon. Anyone want to revisit them? Pinky, go ahead.
I'll be brief, but I am going to revisit. So we are working towards the discovery at the waterfront whether we're going to put in a district energy system. So the port, myself, Sustainable Connections, and Puget Sound Energy, we took a district energy tour and took a look at different systems in Vancouver. One of them is it captures methane from the sewer. Another system is actually a bioenergy system with a combination of a gas backup. We took a look at economies of scale, what it took to run these kind of systems, looked at budgets, looked at pipes, had a really great opportunity to talk to another city who's running an energy utility with district energy. So if anybody wants more details about it, I can tell you all the geeky details, but I'm sure not everybody wants to hear it, so you can contact me if you'd like to, but just let you know that it was very informational for the city and the port to go on this district energy tour and help us figure out how we're going to make decisions going down the road on our district energy system.
Great, Pinky, thanks. And for those who don't know, in our waterfront plans, we actually have baked in rules and regulations with regard to district energy, which is why we're looking into it. April?
Yeah, I wanted to thank Representative Lillian Ortiz Self from the 21st Legislative District. She came to be a keynote speaker at the Latino, they call it the Latino Summit. And also thank the Bellingham School District for making this event. This is the third year that I've been, and it's getting so popular that they're going to have to move to a bigger venue, maybe even Bellingham High. And it's an opportunity to celebrate the great diversity in Latino culture that we have, also to celebrate our graduates that are bringing up their graduation rate. It's quite amazing. And I think just an opportunity for people to get to know each other. It's a very unique experience where I think it'd be great if we could have more of them, but as a person that has to walk in, you immediately have to put on the headphones because everything's in Spanish, and it's just, for me, going every year is a constant reaffirmation that, well, one, anytime you're being translated, you should certainly slow down. But also what that feels like to be the minority in a situation and to not understand the language and all of those things that come with that whenever you're walking into a room too. So thank you so much to Tanya and Isabel Meeker with the Bellingham Public Schools that make this event and all the parents that did it. And of course, Lillian Ortiz Self, who gave a wonderful speech about needing to stick together, support each other, and never ever apologize for asking questions about your children whenever you go to school. So good message.
Okay, thank you. Roxanne?
I had reported previously that I was going to work on a resolution, and I've been doing so with Washington Won't Discriminate to draft a resolution to ask our community to decline to sign Initiative 1552, which would discriminate against our transgender community. And we've got a draft of that, and I'll be working with our city legal department to get their review and then also to set the process forward. So I just wanted you to know that was still in motion.
Okay, anything else under old and new?
Michael, just real quick, what I said this afternoon, the Port Marine Advisory Committee, which I serve on, toured All-American Marine Shipbuilding plant down on the waterfront. They're now under contract for 4 ships, 4 years worth of work, and $32 million worth of work. They're going to expand from 60 to 75 employees, so we're pretty lucky to have them on the waterfront, and to get more jobs on the waterfront it's a good sign. So if you have the chance, go over there and take a look at it. So.
Okay. Dan, yeah.
I was just going to mention that the council this afternoon did reach an agreement on the format for the town hall discussion on affordable housing, and date and time and location to be announced. We're still kind of working through those details, but that can be readily available via our Facebook page and our webpage on the cob.org site.
Well, Dan, and I think you also brought up the issue of citizen accountability. You remember?
I requested that the mayor's office come back to the council with some options on citizen or oversight committee in relation to the immigration ordinance that was passed earlier this year.
Okay. Anything else? Great. I will now report out from the executive session. We had 7 items. The first one was a litigation matter, Newland versus Susi et al. Staff provided information on a litigation matter. It was from information discussion and no action was taken. Second was also litigation, Swadash versus City of Bellingham. Staff again provided information on this matter. It was for information discussion. Again, no action was taken. The final matter was AJ versus City of Bellingham et al. Staff provided information on that litigation matter. And again, it was for discussion and information only. No action was taken. In addition, we discussed 3 potential property acquisitions. Staff provided information on potential property acquisition and no action was taken. No action was taken, no action was taken. Exact same thing on 2 other properties, so 3 in total. And then the last 2 items are similar collective bargaining strategy session. The first one had to do with our bargaining unit, ASME Local 114. Staff provided information regarding labor relations bargaining strategy. Direction was given on that bargaining strategy, but no action was taken. Second one was similar, has to do with ASME Local 114L. Staff provided information regarding labor relations bargaining strategy. Direction again was given, but no action was taken. Okay, excuse me. I think then, Mayor's report.
Good evening, Council. Brian Heinrich, Mayor's Office. We have 2 items. The Mayor is looking for your approval to appoint Paul Stevenson to the Greenway Advisory Committee.
Move approval.
Second.
Any further discussion of the appointment of Paul Stevenson to the Greenways Advisory Commission? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, Paul is approved.
Great, thank you. And then just for your information, the Mayor is appointing Rebecca Brunk and reappointing Roberta DeBoer to the Mayor's Neighborhood Advisory Commission.
Okay, anything else? Okay, so normally at this point we go on to consent agenda, but I believe one council member wanted to pull an item from the consent agenda. Is that still true?
Yeah. So I have a question regarding, it's on page 118.
So this will be pulling the 5th item on the consent agenda. It's a memorandum of agreement with regard to the Alaska Marine Highway. So we will pull that out from the consent agenda right now and discuss it, if there's no objections. Seeing none, we're...
No, and my questions was really quick, and it's actually in regards to the ordinance 2017-02-008. We didn't name it, but a lot of people call it the Sanctuary City Ordinance. We made some really specific requirements in the ordinance regarding immigration enforcement, and I'm interested whenever we partner with other groups and our police go and work with them and partner with them, are they still held accountable to ordinances such as this as they do their work? Or because they're working under another entity, are they no longer held accountable to things like this?
So Peter Raffato, Legal Department. So the question is, when the police do work under this contract for Alaska Marine Highway, how does the ordinance affect that?
Yeah, I'm wondering, because they're specifically K-9 and they're it says they're looking to deter, hopefully, drug activity and other things like that. So I'm interested whenever we contract out with all kinds of different people with our police department or have relationships like this, and whenever we're working with a different department that might have different rules, are they still held accountable to ordinances, especially this one?
Yes, they are. So I can't think of an example from the contracts that I'm aware of, this being one of them. Another one is the Housing Authority. The officers are working under their commission through the Bellingham Police Department. And so I can't think of an example where they wouldn't be under the auspices of the city of Bellingham including the ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, because this item was pulled separately, we need to vote on it separately. Is there a motion to approve this memorandum?
Second.
We have a motion to approve a memorandum of agreement with the Alaska Marine Highway. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, that passed unanimously. Now the remaining items in the consent agenda.
Approval.
Second.
We have a motion to approve the remaining 4 items, I believe, is on the consent agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda also passes unanimously. I believe we are now into final consideration of ordinances, of which there are 3.
Agenda Bill 21605, an ordinance of the City of Bellingham, Washington, relating to land use and zoning, amending Section 20.37.370 Bellingham Municipal Code to address projecting signage standards in the Fairhaven Urban Village.
Move third and final.
Second.
We have a motion before us. Roll call.
Roxanne Murphy.
Aye.
Pinky Vargas.
Aye.
April Barker.
Aye.
Terry Borneman.
Aye.
Dan Hamel. Jean Knutson.
Aye.
Michael Lillequist.
Aye.
Ordinance passes 7-0. Agenda Bill 21606, an ordinance of the City of Bellingham, Washington, relating to land use and zoning, amending Section 20.25.070 Bellingham Municipal Code and Chapter 5 of the Fairhaven Urban Village Design Standards to address fence materials.
Move third and final.
Second.
We have a motion before us. Roll call, please.
Pinky Vargas.
Aye.
April Barker.
Aye.
Terry Borneman.
Aye.
Dan Hamel.
Aye.
Jean Knutson.
Aye.
Michael Lillequist.
Aye.
Roxanne Murphy.
Aye.
Ordinance passes 7-0. Agenda Bill 21607, an ordinance of the City of Bellingham, Washington, relating to land use and zoning, establishing a new section 20.24.020 of the Bellingham Municipal Code to provide for a review process and criteria when determining unclassified uses in commercial and industrial districts.
Move third and final.
Second.
We have a motion before us. Roll call, please.
April Barker. Terry Borneman.
Aye.
Dan Hamel.
Aye.
Jean Knutson.
Aye.
Michael Lillequist.
Aye.
Roxanne Murphy.
Aye.
Pinky Vargas.
Aye.
Ordinance passes 7-0.
Okay, is there any further business for the City Council? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Really smooth tonight, didn't it?